If there was a quote to sum up how franchises have made fans feel over the recent years, it would likely be MJ's line,
"Expect disappointment and you will never get disappointed."
Remember how franchises began as humble little corner restaurants? Well-crafted stories that had something interesting to offer, ultimately cooked with a respectable amount of time, effort, and passion from the story cooks? My, how the menu has changed. No wonder modern work feels like it was written by kids sometimes. Child employees are likely way cheaper to hire than the Red Seal storytellers, especially when the demand and production speed is so high. It's actually brilliant in an illegal sort of way, apart from the fact that these shows and movies don't have the secret flavors that warrant endless rewatchability.
Where's the lamb sauce?
But, as a sarcastic storytelling chef myself, I can confidently say that I am 1, not a child, and 2, equipped enough to fix the franchise dilemmas and restore it to the quality that fans deserve. Here's how to cure the many plagues of the modern franchise.
More! That's enough.
Let's get the most obvious plague right out of the way. Oversaturation. With the sheer abundance of stories, characters, and events going on in any given franchise, it's hard to keep up with all that's going on at the rate they are being created. The pace that large studios pump out projects is, in some cases, twice as fast as it was even a few years ago. Marvel took 10 years to complete the Infinity Saga, carefully laying out all the pieces and characters while giving each project time to breathe before the next. Post-Endgame, ironically a fitting name, the Multiverse Saga will have wrapped up in a total of around 5 years. Let that sink in. Like dang, Marvel is moving faster than Scar's atrocious hairline.
Bruh!
The space between projects should not be taken for granted, and from personal experience I found that special things are special because they don't happen all the time. Even though it may be great to catch up with characters sooner than anticipated, seeing them shoved into someone else's adventures can potentially undermine them when they're back in the spotlight, like how Mando hijacked the Book of Boba Fett during his downtime between seasons 2 and 3. Who am I kidding? That narrative detour was the best part of the show. Now that brings up a franchise plague that sometimes comes in festering boils. Interconnection. The fact that characters and arcs are being developed across multiple projects and not their own is crippling to the timeline of things, not to mention making it difficult to watch as a casual fan. Needing to see several shows, or in the case of Rise of Skywalker, read a book, means that the narrative cannot truly stand on its own 2 feet. If things cannot be nicely self-contained and explained in the single story they're presented in, the writing isn't strong. This doesn't necessarily apply to sequels because, obviously, they're sequels, but if you're going to have, say, a villain motivation, don't let the entire context exist in a separate TV show. And yet, on the other foot, trying to interconnect plot or character threads that won't be relevant until a few movies later is also a problem in of itself. It's brilliant for getting people back into the theater, but too much future setup per project can hinder the overall quality. Paired with the production pace of a barreling train, establishing new threads can take away from the current experience if the audience is, in a way, programmed to watch, anticipate, and repeat. This bane often means that the current narrative can't properly deliver and mull around in our minds. And in extreme cases, acting like an expensive trailer for the next big thing while forgetting to have a story of its own to tell. In the wise words of that old guy from Toy Story 2,
"You can't rush art."
This man has the solution to this plague. Obvious, yes, but indeed a vital part of storytelling and franchise building. Peter Jackson didn't make the perfect trilogy in 3 years. It took a decade of planning, pre-production, drafts, revision, shooting, editing, and look what he and his team achieved. Making something with eyes on the box office first and the filmmaking craft second will lead to formulaic mediocrity, or worst case, a soiled diaper like Dragon Ball Evolution. These examples are day and night, which all comes down to passion, quality of writing, and the amount of time given to create. You care and take the necessary time, you can make something incredible featuring Billy Boyd. You don't care and you don't take the necessary time, you end up with a crap movie starring great value, Billy Boyd. Hey man, welcome to Walmart! While it's true both styles of production can or will make the studios money, only one is given the chance to truly work through inevitable issues and get to a good or even great result. By slowing down, this can help franchises potentially produce highly rewatchable films and shows, strengthening the loyalty of their fanbase in the process. And as we've seen, when the production train barrels toward the cinemas at record time, the only way to stop properly is to crash.
My box office. My box office.
If you expect disappointment, then you can never really get disappointed.
Okay.
This particular play can have a devastating impact on a franchise when disregarded. Audience expectation. Imagination is a powerful thing, and when harnessed right, will let the audience boost the story to more than what it's presented as. done wrong and you can get people disappointed, to say the least. For a case study, when the Book of Boba Fett was announced, many, including myself, were hoping to see a Godfather-like crime syndicate show, with planetary travel, tense conversations, deals, betrayals, all that good stuff. What we got was not at all as expected, contradicting the type of character Boba was shown to be in the original trilogy in favor of a retired man who spent his days on a planet with 2 sons, and yet somehow still only one shadow.
Boba Fett
is the most boring vanilla dude. You know, he just sits at home with his
best for kids,
having a bland spaghetti dinner, talking about his day.
Imagination is often superior to reality, especially when we as the audience are given fragments of something and attempt to fill in the rest based on those snippets. This is only heightened when franchises grow bigger every year and give us more to think about. Because of these things, we almost overhype ourselves and expect too much, even if we're aware of the studio's track record. It's a weird relationship where the golden days are but a whisper in our minds, telling us to hold on a show or a movie longer to see if it could become golden again in some way. And no, we're not at fault for thinking this way. Yet the best way to avoid this expectation problem is to avoid this expectation problem. Oh yes, we're using our biggest brains for this solution.
You very smart.
In the age of reboots, prequel stories and such, the plague of expectation is there before writers even begin. Going down the road of what John and Dave did so wonderfully with Mando is a great way to stay in the franchise's universe while not filling in too many of the gaps. This way, writers have more creative freedoms to stay focused on something new entirely, opposed to a potential retread for the sake of nostalgic characters, which carry a whole trove of expectation on their own. The newer projects can oppositely feel fresh because they take things in a new direction, introducing interesting new characters, or even opting for a different tone that uniquely sets it apart from the rest. That is, assuming the writers are truly masterful and passionate at their work, and don't just undercook the narrative.
It's wrong!
Man, Pirates has never been the same since the original 3 mines left. Did we really need more? I need to speak with Bob Paycheck. And here's a smaller plague that comes from this greater one. Conclusions. Just because the studios can continue the story past the big finale doesn't mean that they should. If there's one thing I've realized about franchises and their best stories, is that they're not only well made and leave a lasting impact, but have a clear end to tie up all the loose threads. No add-ons, no continuations, the best and most character-rich stories have already been told. Studios may try and say, oh yeah, and then the kids of these well-written and well-loved characters went out and had adventures of their own, setting out to stop an evil so evil it plagiarized a better and more superior evil. You already know it won't stack up to the original stories, because the expectation that they set is way too high. And sure, it's fun to see familiar faces, but who actually wants to see their childhood heroes grow old or potentially die for the sake of plot?
Why are you
dead.
Who says I'm
Dead.
You are
Dead.
This idea of continuous conclusions is what led me to develop a certain saying, one that absolutely applies to how narratives are needlessly stretched out. A good writer knows when their story ends. Better to have the audience say, I wish they made more, than, I wish they'd stop. It's what keeps the original Golden Work so special, untouched and unreferenced by other, oftentimes lesser stories. We can't expect great things and get disappointed when there's no new work to expect. Nothing there to fill in the gaps and fall short of incredible human imagination. It is said that comparison is the thief of joy, and naturally the audience will compare related stories, whether or not they're made by the same creative team, as is the case with Lord of the Rings versus the Rings of Power. But sadly for the cure of this franchise plague, studios will keep making more add-ons to fill in the gaps because the interest is there to financially support a production. While it's true that some spin-off stories are absolutely narratively successful and all-around well-received, the ones that miss this vital mark are lacking one core thing. The lamb sauce.
Wow, okay.
First of all, that is delicious. That's made with passion.
Yeah, I'd give that 9 out of 10.
A production means nothing if a script doesn't exist to give it purpose, so naturally the writing is the most important thing in this regard. Without a good story, the stuff on the screen doesn't have a proper chance to fully matter. The incredible visuals, music, props, they're just there to exist and support the story and give it life, depth, and lore. Having noticed a common thread through many high-quality narratives over the years, it's become clear that they all share 3 vital words at their core. Plot versus story.
What did you say?
Plot versus story. Okay, now let me clarify. Plot, in this context, is the events that happen. As in, they go here, find this, dodge a crappy narrative plague here, all of that. A story, in this regard, refers to the characters. Their motivations, struggles, wants, conflicts, relationships. You know, the things below the visuals and music that give the narrative actual meaning. A key thing to note is that plot without the substance of story is just things happening, and above all else, the reason why a show or movie can come across as bland. Taking a general guess with my current knowledge, the balance between these two in a well-crafted narrative will look something like this. You see, when a screenwriter underestimates the power of human stories and character journeys, it can quickly send any project hurling towards the bottom of the barrel.
Where's the lamb sauce?
Something tells me this meme is going to be a staple on this channel. Taking this back to franchises, when different writers use a well-known character in their scripts, said character can change drastically depending on who's writing them. Especially if the screenwriter favors the plot over the story, they can easily present us with a dreaded passive character, or one who is pushed by the plot. The opposite of this is an active character, or one who uses their motivations to keep the plot going and thus the movie. Primarily getting off the Marvel train with Endgame, when I stepped in to see what Doctor Strange was up to, I was taken aback at just how different he'd become. He started out with a solid debut in 2016 as an active character, but due to writing and the true plague of rush production, became this pawn of the plot who acts out of character, sometimes becoming incredibly incompetent and making me and the other Doctor Strange fans want to punch the screen.
I wonder what Doctor Strange has been up to. Let's take a look.
Why would you do that?
The fix for this final plague is simple. Character stories. Character stories are the secret lamb sauce. The reason why the best movies or shows are remembered and revisited is because they carry human emotion and a solid perspective. The storytellers at Pixar excel with this. Their audience can recall moments that made them genuinely feel something because of how they related, sympathized, or even empathized with the characters. This human perspective is how franchises create a loyal fan base and keep it. This is how you fill the theater and get people to come back. This is how you employ passionate people and make their work worthy of remembrance. You can't rush art. More importantly, you can't rush good art. And when something is truly excellent, there's minimal debate on the quality because it speaks for itself. These plagues, all of them discussed, they can go away. Studios can produce new and exciting stories that make us feel something, help us escape, or even get us through a tough time in life. Franchises don't need to release multiple things a year in order to be considered good. And they don't need to remake great movies for the sake of money. Why not instead remake the bad movies with lamb sauce writing and redeem some trust in your audience? When the cracks start to show, when the VFX artists are being pushed beyond their limit, the culture around said franchise changes. And yet, hope always remains when the Red Seal storytellers are in the kitchen, daring to step out of the franchise formula and make something we haven't truly seen before, a story that demands more time and focus to get right. Film is an art form after all, but when utilized to a high level, it can become incredibly emotional and powerful, teaching us a thing or two about the world, or even ourselves. Those that fall under this aspect become films of comfort for so many. Franchises have the funds and creative minds to capture this magic every single time. They just have to cure the plagues that weigh them down and cook with that golden lamb sauce. Please leave a saucy like and subscribe to join the Star Council. Click on this video to see what happens when a capable and passionate team helms a project.